There's a lot for you to keep track of right now. A pandemic, a recession, a historic push for racial justice. Remember when the only big thing on our minds was the 2020 election? New Jersey's primary is this Tuesday. Our NBC station in Philadelphia reports that it is shaping up to be a test of New Jersey's ability to run a drama-free election. That's despite President Trump's tweets and a push by Republicans for federal election monitors. The article is referencing tweets like this one from Thursday, where the president claims that mail-in ballots will lead to massive electoral fraud and a rigged 2020 election. Contrast that with what happened in Colorado. It had a record-breaking primary this week, thanks in part to its universal system of voting by mail. Coloradans cast more than 1.6 million ballots. Voter turnout was roughly 46%. And 99.3% of those ballots, basically all of them, were returned via mail or a ballot drop box. Joining us now is Jena Griswold, Colorado's Secretary of State. She, like other secretaries of state, oversees her state's elections. Secretary Griswold, good morning.
Good morning.
Let's start with the president's voter fraud claims. You fact-checked him on Twitter, noting that 99.59% of Republican voters voted by mail in the primary last week. Why do you think the president is so vocally critical about mail-in voting?
Well, he has clearly told us that he thinks mail ballots will allow Democrats to win more elections than Republicans. But that's just factually incorrect. Study after study shows that mail ballots doesn't benefit one party over the other. And Colorado's elections, where so many Republicans cast a mail ballot, more than even Democrats, should serve as proof that mail ballots help voters, not political parties.
Why was Colorado's primary so smooth this time around? Your universal system of voting by mail is not new.
It is not new. We love mail ballots here in Colorado, and we really push them. I launched a television and digital voter engagement to really encourage Coloradans to use their mail ballots to help stop the spread of COVID-19. We also recruited judges and issued a series of emergency rules to make sure that in-person voting was as smooth as possible also. We did have approximately 10,000 people vote in person, and that in-person access is still very important. About 40% of all in-person voters were under the age of 34. So we want to make sure that people who are registering for the first time or voting for the first time also have safe access.
I want to make sure I heard that statistic correctly. You said that 40% of all mail-in voters were 34 years old or younger. Did I hear that right?
No, I said about 40% of in-person voting consisted of people who were 34 years of age or younger.
Gotcha. That's why I asked, to make sure that I got it right, because I didn't. Now, there was a case of voter fraud and ballot stuffing that happened in New Jersey, in Paterson, New Jersey, in May. That's been investigated. The vote totals, the results, are apparently certified now, that they're fine now that those ballots have been dealt with. Is there room to improve how we deal with or prevent voter fraud, even though instances like this one are rare?
Well, Colorado really serves as an example of clean elections. We have safeguards in place, including limits on the number of ballots that can be collected and signature verification to make sure that any attempts of double voting are caught. And I do think other states can do the same. But overall, the rate of double voting is extremely low, and we catch it. And we can look towards New Jersey as an example of how to catch potential voter fraud. It is very hard to pull off. But what is easy to pull off is voter suppression. You just have to look towards Wisconsin or Georgia to see voter suppression is alive and well. And we cannot allow the president to use the pandemic as a tool of voter suppression. We know how to run elections during a pandemic and even increase turnout, and that's the adoption of universal mail ballots.
Is this whole controversy kind of much ado about nothing? I mean, the Washington Post compiled a list of 16 Trump administration officials who have voted by mail recently. They include the president, also the First Lady, Ivanka Trump, the press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany, Attorney General Bill Barr. The list goes on and on. What does that tell you? Is this kind of a tempest in a teapot?
Well, it tells us that there's political motivation, and I just think it's reprehensible that the president, who uses a mail ballot, would want to force Americans to risk their health to cast a ballot. So the much ado is that this is an active attempt of further voter suppression. We have to understand that using the pandemic is not standing alone. We've seen voter suppression alive and well, unfortunately, in this country over the past decades, and only increasing. So I do think it's very telling that the president is so focused on mail ballots and spreading these false narratives. I think he is incorrect. Using mail ballots won't help Democrats over Republicans. As our election showed, Republicans like to use mail ballots. But that's what the president believes, to his detriment. What mail ballots do is help voters, and we need to have that access. Every state in the nation, if they want their voters to vote during a pandemic, will adopt mail ballots as quickly as possible.
And before I let you go, for states that still have primaries yet to come, what would your advice be to them in terms of how they deal with their mail-in ballots?
Well, they can give us a call. We're here to help. You know, we've used mail ballots for several years now, and we really want to see all Americans have the same type of access that Coloradans have. And by the way, the president also should give me a call. He seems to be very confused about mail ballots, even though he uses them. And we're happy to explain to him and his administration about how our democracy can work during the pandemic.
He did tweet recently that he felt that absentee ballots were fine, but that mail-in ballots were rife with voter fraud. Absentee ballots and mail-in ballots are the same thing. So, yeah, that's worth a little bit of clarification. By the way, if you are a mail voter and you are concerned about fraud, you can always take your ballot to the elections office. You don't have to drop it in the mailbox. There are ways to drop it off physically. Jena Griswold is Colorado's Secretary of State. Secretary Griswold, thanks very much.
Thank you.